floor-to-ceiling ball, or as is termed by our cousins over in the States, the double-end bag, is my favourite piece of boxing equipment to use, more than any other piece of equipment. This develops hand-eye coordination, speed, reflexes, accuracy, and it also teaches you some defensive moves and how to keep your head off the centre line. You can move around the thing. There's a great deal that you can do with this. So let's start with a very quick tutorial going through from some of the basics into some of the more advanced things that you can do using this, which I would argue is the most useful piece of equipment that you'll find in any gym. Okay, safety first. These bags have clips here, and this one here hasn't been taped over, so you're going to need some tape. I just use cornerman tape here, and make sure that these things are covered. If these aren't covered, they can cause you a nasty cut. I have a nasty scar on my back actually from where one of these cut me as it went past, so do be careful with that. So make sure that you have these taped over. This is often overlooked, but make very sure that your ground anchor, or whatever it's attached to, is attached very, very firmly. So make sure that turns in. You can see I'm tightening that right up there. Again, I made this mistake when I was, this is about 30 years ago. I punched this thing and this came out and actually went into my arm here, and I have a hole in my arm as a result of that. So don't allow that to occur. Tighten that up. Tighten up the top as well to make sure that nothing is going to come loose. Safety first, set up second. Now there's different ways you can set your ball up. You can put it tighter, you can put it on a longer chain, a longer rope. Now they then tend to move a bit too far apart, so I think that having something that's not too high is good. I want it to move up and down as well as side to side like this, so not too much tension. The tighter the tension, the closer the ball is going to be to the centre, and the easier it's going to be to use. The ball itself can be set up in different ways. Now this one has a little bit of squeeze in it, so this thing is going to be pretty much that's going to be a little bit softer, and that's good for beginners because the bag is not going to move it's not going to react quite as quickly as a ball that is blown up hard. So with beginners, let a little bit of air out of this. See also our video on the speed bag, because you should let the air out of that if you're a beginner on that too. And we can do this. There's also another way to set this up. Let me show you my other bag. Here you can see a bag that is pretty much entirely deflated. What happened was this was by accident, and I discovered that this was actually quite good. What happens is that I hit this thing too hard and the bladder has burst. It happens. But there's no need really to throw this thing away. So what I've done is I've put it against the ropes here, so we can practice fighting off the ropes with pretty much a dead ball here, and it's not going to recoil as quick, and it's not going to smack anybody in the face. I'll do some demonstrations on that in a minute, but you can see that even if the ball is dead, it doesn't mean that you have to throw it away, and that there's nothing that you set up for the height is going to vary depending on where you like to put it. If I'm going to be boxing a taller opponent, I'm going to put this higher. If I'm going to be boxing a shorter opponent, I'll put it nearer to shoulder width height. But this is quite cleverly set up that I have two different clips on this, so that when I have the younger boxers come in, I can actually put this straight down there, and this is then ready for the younger boxers to come in. And then what I can do is I can then lift this up for the seniors to come in later, and we don't have to mess around with different heights. So having an extra link, just a small bit of rope in there, is a good idea. Make sure your rope is light. If it's too heavy, the ball will not react quick enough. So once you've got set up, we're going to need a bit of equipment. Now, there's different ways of doing this. You can use bag mitts, or you can use your hands, purely your hands. Now be careful with that, but it's a very good way to learn on a soft ball. But ideally what I like to use on the floor to ceiling ball is my contest weight gloves. There's always an opportunity for the boxer to get used to their contest weight gloves when they're training, and not just using heavy sparring gloves or very light bag mitts. So on this piece of equipment myself, I like to use contest weight gloves. The choice is yours, but I find that this is going to increase accuracy and get you used to those gloves that you're going to be using. Now that we've got ourselves set up, the first thing you're going to need to do is get yourself into a stance. And let's not have one of those stances where you square on like this, because this is going to react like an opponent. You need to point your shoulder directly into the centre of that ball, as if it's an opponent, like this. I'm going to turn sideways so that you can see this a little bit better. And what you should do is when you're starting, now these are not technically correct punches, but you'll see what I'm going to do. You're going to hit the centre of the ball, and you're going to throw small, short punches like this. And just get used to that rhythm, and try and put the ball from one hand to the other, like this. And just keep doing that. I think it's best to do this with bare hands, just till you get used to the feel of this, and don't hit the ball too hard. Just hit the thing gently like this, and control the ball so you get used to this. Once you get better at that, once you are able to do that, and you become more accurate, you're going to lengthen your punches, and you're going to move away from it. Now this is going to require more accuracy on your behalf. At this stage, still don't punch too quickly, but from here, just begin to move back to full range. And at the moment, when you're doing this, you should be doing straight shots only. Don't start doing hooks yet at this stage. Now to find your range with this bag, because this bag is going to come into and out of range, and it's going to pass through the edge of range. You need to check this with your shoulder forward. This is important. Don't check your range here with your shoulder flat, or you're going to be punching through the ball and it's going to react too quickly. You need to have your shoulder forward like that. From the other side, you can see me there if I'm in a southpaw stance. That shoulder is forward. That's going to give you the right range for you to do this. Straight shots first, then we go on to hooks. When I'm in this position, and I'm doing my straight shots, there are some other moves that I can use. I can use the lay back, for example, or sway back. So from here, I can go 1, 2, lay back. This is going to move me back out of range of this coming at me like an opponent. The other thing I can do is I can learn to move my head off the centre line. So I can 1, 2, and I can slip. I can slip to the side of the ball. This thing does bounce off the wall, so it reacts in a slightly different way to some balls. The other thing I can do is, after I've thrown a hard number 2 punch, the cross, I can then defend like this with the salute block. So I can bring my hand up, boom, boom, there, and I can block there, so that I'm going to make sure that I'm defended correctly on this side. So there's several defensive things that you can do while still getting used to the ball moving forward and backward before you need to start throwing hooks. Once you start throwing hooks and uppercuts, this thing becomes way more difficult. So get used to doing all the moves off the straight shots first before you start doing the hooks. Whilst you're doing this, this ball is designed to be used to work on speed and accuracy and reflexes. It's not something that you want to be hitting as hard as you possibly can. In a boxing match, let me tell you, you are not punching flat out as hard as you can with every single punch, because you'll become exhausted, your opponent will figure out your tells. You don't do that. You're going to be throwing some shots that are harder, some that are softer. The majority of people will agree speed kills. So what you want to do is we want to keep this nice and quick. Now, for those of you that are using the pick punch tracker sensors, this is important. On my bag here, this is my heavy bag. The difference between speed between this and this, there's always going to be a difference in speed, because this bag does not move much, whereas this bag moves a lot. Now what you want to try and do if you're working on your accuracy and your speed, because speed and accuracy will go hand in hand, what you want to do is you want to get your speed on this as close to the speed on this as is humanly possible. And the margin you should be aiming for, in my opinion, having tested these things over years now, 10%. If you are 20% difference in speed between this and this, you need to work on accuracy. And there are lots of accuracy drills that you can do. Also getting used to using this, but that 10% is your magic figure. If you can get down to only 10% difference between the two, you're doing a good job. If you're at 20%, you need to improve. So you know where to work on. So if your sessions, you're spending too much time on this, perhaps you need to consider doing something on this. Now the other thing to bear in mind is because the pick sensor does measure G-force, that is not going to be comparable because this is not going to register as much G-force as when you hit a bag like this. The heavier the bag, the bigger the G-force it's going to register because it stops the punch much, much faster. So I don't think you should really be comparing those as parameters if you're using punch tracker sensors, because it's not going to give you data that is going to be usable in any form. Work on speed, not on power. Measure and compare speed, not power, when using the double end bag. Okay, let's move on to hooks and uppercuts. Now, this is where you really are going to need, if you're using hooks and uppercuts, you're going to have your gloves on for this. It's not safe to be throwing punches like this against a moving target where your hand is unprotected and could go around back there. This is going to compress here, the scaphoid bone against the radius bone, and it could potentially break. The other thing as well is on the bottom of these bags, there's always inevitably a little bit of a pin there, a rivet to hold this in place. When you throw your uppercuts here, the chances are you're hitting something moving. You could take the skin off your knuckles. Now, that's all very well if you want to walk around at the pub and show people your knuckles and, yeah, I'm a fighter, look at my knuckles. But to any sensible fighter, we protect our knuckles. We wear bandages, we wear gloves, because these are the tools of our trade. Getting them injured is not a heroic thing, so don't even think about it. Protect your hands, get the gloves on. Now the ball is going to begin to move in different planes of direction. So once I've thrown my 2, if I throw my punch number 3, the lead hand hook, that's going to move the ball that way, which is going to make it very much more difficult for me to hit this. This is a case of getting used to it. You might need to reduce your speed down a little bit as you do this. So get used to throwing the hooks and the uppercuts against a ball, and start slowly and aim for the center of the ball. And what you'll do is you will be able, after a while, if you've got reasonable coordination, you'll be able to get that ball to be able to come back centered after a single shot. And then the ball will be able to come back into the middle, and it'll start moving forwards and backwards again. And you can control the ball rather than it controlling you. One of my favorite drills to do with other boxers is what we call a double end bag war. So my other friend, my boxer, is on this side, I'm on this side, and we see who can control this ball and keep the control away from the other person. And it's basically done on possession. Who possesses the ball longer wins. It's not who hits the ball hardest, and you're not trying to smack it into somebody else's face, but who controls the ball better is the one who is the winner. And just do that at a little bit slower speed, because you'll find that that is a little bit more difficult. It's a great drill to do. With your uppercuts from this, of course, the same thing. Make sure you have your hand protection when you're doing this. Now let's also consider the fact that this thing has some strings here as well. You can use these as a target. One of my favourite combinations that I like, the amateur boxers that I coach, is to go up and down to the body. It confuses the opponent at this level, and it's 2 shots that are going to be on the centre line here. When I'm doing this, I have a combination which I call high-low 2. It's just a jab that goes high, and then a jab that goes low. So you just punch to the rope like this, and then we've got 2 there. Now the rhythm for that is different to the opposite combination to this. The rhythm for this is high, low, 2. High, low, 2, like that. When we throw the opposite and we go low, high, 2, we go low, high, 2, like that. And the rhythm is slightly different, so we go low, high, 2, there, like that. So there are 2 different combinations you can use when you're using the rope here, just as a target. Again, it's on the center line, so it makes a sensible target for you to go for when you're using that ball. Moving on, we start now to move around the ball, and this really is what this thing is absolutely fantastic for, changing angles and keeping your own head off the center line. Point your shoulder at the target here, just the same as you would on your bag, just the same as you would on your opponent. You're pointing your shoulder at my center line. So if you line up in your stance now and aim at me, you want your shoulder pointed right down here, because that means if you're in that position, you can hit me with 2 hands. If you're off the center line, you might only be able to land this one and this one's going to miss. If someone's off too far this way, then you'll be able to hit them with this, but this one's not going to reach. So you've got to have that shoulder pointed right down the center at them, like this. Watch our footwork training videos as well, because you're going to need, I'm not going to focus on the footwork too much on this, but you're going to need to turn your front foot sideways, and your heel is going to point in the direction of your travel. If you don't get that right, you will lumber across like this and you will not be fluid. So watch our footwork training system videos and they're going to help you. Point your shoulder at the target and just move around like this. Now this is going to be difficult because when you do this, you are changing the angle of the ball as you go, so you're going to have to go slowly at first. I can do this quickly, but the demonstration needs to be slow so you guys can understand what's going to happen. Watch our other footwork training system videos as well, because you'll know, if you've been watching those, that when you go 1, 2, 1 and you finish on the lead hand, you're going to move to your lead side, your lead foot. When you go 1, 2, boom, boom, you're going to move to the back foot, because this then helps you to avoid being on the center line for this ball coming at you. If you move the wrong way, if I go 1, 2 there, the ball's going to hit me, just the same as my opponent would. If I go the wrong way, doing a 1, 2, 1, that ball's coming straight down the pipe and into me. When you're doing this, try to get used to moving your head off the center line as you move, like this. Keep your other hand high. Backhand is always used more for defense than the front hand. Cross-arm defense is really good with this. Catching the shot like this, parrying the shot as it comes in, there. Get used to doing that and get used to controlling that ball as you move. Move both ways around. I can't move all the way around here because this ball is too close to the wall here, but if it's further out, then you can do an entire circle and you can move around it and practice that. That's a footwork training drill, so you've got to be accurate with your footwork. I'd say get used to the hands first before you get used to moving the feet. If you start moving your feet and the hands at the same time, you're working on 2 separate things and it's just a bit too complicated. To get used to doing these things and to be really good on them might take you as long as a year. Some people are really quick. But I think if you take your time and get to know this thing and do it right instead of rushing it, I think you're going to do a lot better. Now let me show you on my other ball how I use the ropes and what we do with that. So here I am with the other ball against the ropes. Now, there's 2 things that we can do when we've got this thing here. 1, I can keep my opponent pressed on the ropes. So I can learn to use my footwork and move here and keep my opponent pressed onto the ropes. One thing I like to do with these things when I'm in this position here, it's something I do more with professional fighters than amateur fighters, but it's something that's worth learning to do. When someone's on here, instead of throwing things like your straight shot, which is a perfect dead-on straight shot, this is where you get to throw what I'd call your dirty shots. When someone's in this position, you can chop over the top there and blast across at unusual angles. This is where you are controlling this ball to stay on the ropes. If I need to keep my hand on its face to keep it there and to control it, this is where you can do that. But you need this just a couple of feet from the ropes so that you're able to control that ball, control your opponent, and if you need to, if your opponent's moving this way, push it this way. Put your hand on its shoulder and push it this way and move it round. These things are not typical perfect boxing technique, but they sure as hell will help you win a fight, I guarantee that. Now let's look at it the other way. So I'm on the ropes. I'm on the ropes here. If you've watched our footwork training system videos, you will know the first thing that happens when you're against the ropes is your stance shortens and you get compressed against the ropes like this. This is dangerous, and the problem is that I have very little in the way of longitudinal stability, which means because I'm in this position, I'm square, center line is exposed, I have very little power in the backhand because I don't have this twist in the one leg clearly in front of the other. So the first thing you're going to do, obviously, is you're going to lengthen your stance. So you're going to be defending like this. then you're going to lengthen your stance, put your hand against your opponent, you're going to lift up your front heel, pivot push, and then put your opponent against the ropes like that. So it's very good to have this bag, even though this is deflated, have this bag against the ropes. And I found that having this bag against the ropes here, it's actually better if the bag is deflated. Go figure. I broke it by accident and I've figured out something that works better for me. You can also do this as well. Hopefully you can see me from this angle. I'm inside of the ropes now. And now what this is going to do is this is going to teach me two things. One, do not drop my hands. A lot of people drop their hands on retraction. We don't want that. We want them to bring their hands back, straight back to there. The second thing this is going to do, it's going to teach me to keep my distance from the ball and not to crowd it, like this. So, there's a few different versions, a few different things that you can do with the speed ball, the double end bag, a few things for some technical data as to how you can use your pick robot and sensor in order to make sure that you have the good accuracy and speed accuracy, which is incredibly important. They say that speed beats power, speed kills. They also say timing beats speed, but I think that speed and accuracy are two things that are very, very, very useful to have. If you want to look this up, one of our other videos concentrates on the specifics of accuracy, and I will do another video on that, but it concentrates on the specifics of accuracy and what we call visual steering. Visual steering is where I have an object and I bring my hand to contact that. When you're doing this against something that is a moving opponent, like that, it's much, much harder, and it's a learned skill. I'll do a longer video on visual steering later, but there is another video on our YouTube site that covers visual steering, one of our older ones from 3 or 4 years ago. So feel free to watch that. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope this has been helpful. There are lots of other good videos on the internet to watch this, so don't just take my opinion on it. Go watch some of them, steal some ideas, steal some drills from the other guys who are expert in boxing too. You can see I forgot to tape this up, so I need to tape that up. This has only just been put up 5 minutes ago. Good luck with the floor-to-ceiling ball or the double end bag. Like I say, it's my favourite bit of kit. If you don't have one of these in your gym, you need to get one.